Good morning. Thank you for coming to this session. This session is scheduled for 1.5 hours, which is quite a long time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide it into two halves. In the first half, I want to talk about 21st century education from the big perspective, from a global point of view. What are the challenges for 21st century education? And then we'll have a 5-minute break. And in the second half, I'm going to show you some examples of lesson activities using interactive technology. So you can see the kind of things that are happening in classrooms using this technology. Okay, so first of all, 21st century education. I always like to start with this slide, a quotation by H.G. Wells. Civilization is a race between education and disaster. That's something gone. Right, disaster. I think this is very true, particularly now when the world faces such a wide range of challenges. But we have to ask ourselves, what are the goals of education? Why teach people? Why educate people? From the point of view of the world, from the point of view of countries and governments, why do we educate? The immediate answer that a lot of people come up with is economic growth. If we educate students to be effective workers, to be effective innovators, then it will contribute to economic growth. But that's not the only reason why we educate. It's not just about money. Social cohesion is a fundamental education goal, especially with early learners. If we educate children at a very early age to be good citizens, to be compassionate, then we contribute to social cohesion. Happiness. More and more, particularly in Europe, in the European community, citizen well-being and citizen happiness is seen as a fundamental goal of education. Basically, happy, contented, healthy citizens is seen as an ideal goal. Now, this is an interesting piece of information because it shows the direct relationship between education and earnings. These are statistics taken from the US, and you can see the difference between somebody who leaves high school without finishing their high school program, compared to somebody who leaves high school, compared to somebody who graduates from university. And you can see that the person who graduates from university will end up earning twice as much as the person who does not complete secondary school. But we have a problem. This graph shows the decline in manufacturing and traditional industries at the end of the 20th century, beginning of the 21st century. As you can see, in Europe, in the US, in Britain and Japan, the old kinds of jobs are disappearing. Now, before I came here, I had a look in the newspaper for a list of jobs. This is a list of jobs that were advertised in the newspaper. I don't understand what any of those jobs are. These are future jobs. These are jobs that we have to educate our children for. So we're having to educate our children for jobs that did not exist before, and we simply don't know what they're going to be. How can we teach children to do jobs, to take part in society, if we simply don't know what they're going to do? Here's some more examples. So what we have to think about We have to think about teaching our children what we call 21st century skills. Because the old ways of working are disappearing. We have to teach them new ways of interacting and learning. So, for example, we have to teach them to be good communicators. We have to teach them to be creative. We have to teach them to collaborate. And we have to teach them critical thinking skills. Because the world is changing so rapidly, we can't base our education system on the old content, knowledge-based methodologies. So we have to teach them to collaborate. We have to teach them to work with each other. And we also have to come up with methods for personalizing learning, to make learning personalized and individual. We can no longer rely on education systems that create one method for every child, because it doesn't work. So we need to train our children up in skills. We need to educate them for 21st century jobs, so they can contribute to economies and economic growth. But I want to tell you a really interesting little story. This is about an American guy who had the best education anybody in the world could possibly have. He went to one of the top private schools in the United States. He went to MIT as an undergraduate, and then he went as a business graduate to Harvard Business School. That is an incredible education. This guy was one of the best educated people in the world. This is a true story. He became the head of one of the most powerful banks, Morgan Guaranty, in the United States. And he basically was arrested for fraud. He was arrested for fraud. And during the investigation, they discovered that he had spent about $5 million on furniture for his office, for a nice new desk and a nice chair covered in leather. And he'd spent $1,400 US on a waste paper basket. That's possibly the most expensive waste paper basket in the world. And the point of the story is, it's no good teaching 21st century skills. It's no good teaching children how to contribute to the economy if we neglect moral education. So, 21st century education is not just teaching people to be good, efficient learners or good, efficient workers. It's also fundamental that we teach them ethical awareness, global awareness, compassion and citizenship. Because the best education in the world has no value if it does not have a moral basis. This is very important. Now, what is happening at the moment is that there is a whole range of different disciplines that are coming together in the area of education. And what I want to talk about next is a few of the different areas that will have a significant impact on our understanding of how children learn. And I'm going to look at technology. I'm going to look at the impact of implementing technology in the classroom. But I also want to look at neuroscience and some of the latest discoveries in how the human brain learns. Until the 1990s, there were three ways to study the human brain. You could look at a dead human brain, and it didn't tell you anything, it's just a brain. Okay, very nice. The other way was to experiment on animals. So you get a rat, or you get a monkey, and you experiment on the brain, see what happens, and then you say, well, if the rat does this, then a human will do this. Which doesn't really make a lot of sense. The third way, and this occasionally happened, was during operations on people who were suffering from a form of epilepsy. When the patient is conscious, they would pass electric currents through the brain, and the person would say, I can smell strawberries. I remember my grandmother. Because the current was triggering messages in the brain. But all of those three methods are very unnatural. It's an unnatural way to study the mind. However, what happened in the mid-90s was a new method of studying the human mind was developed called functional magnetic resonance imaging, or MRI. And with functional magnetic resonance imaging, we can study a normal, healthy human brain while it is thinking and learning. We don't have to do any experiments. We just ask people to do certain activities like reading or learning or memorizing, and we can study the brain. And this has completely revolutionized the way that we understand the human mind. The first thing we've discovered is the brain changes throughout our entire life. We used to think that when we hit 12 years old, that was the best our brain would ever be, and from then on it's not true. The brain changes and learns throughout your entire life. There is still hope. This is really interesting, particularly for schools, particularly for lessons. Failure makes the brain more plastic. There is a chemical inside the brain called serotonin. And serotonin is like the oil in your car engine. It makes it work more smoothly, it makes the brain develop faster. If you do something and you fail, the serotonin in your brain increases, you learn faster. Not only that, if you see somebody else fail, the serotonin also increases. Failure is good. If we fail, we learn better than if we succeed. But in classrooms, the problem that we have is, traditionally, failure is negative. If kids fail, it's a negative situation. That's completely wrong. Failure makes the brain work better. The other thing that is also discovered through MRI is that pointing increases learning. The simple physical act of pointing increases learning. So, for example, getting children to use an interactive whiteboard where they're pointing, using their hands or using a pen, actually increases the ability of the brain to learn. And vision is our strongest learning tool. Again, these are all the latest discoveries in neuroscience. A lot of this we kind of knew, but this is now giving us the scientific proof to back up what we'd always suspected. How do animals learn? How do animals learn? They learn by playing. How do humans learn best? Humans learn through playing. Playing and failure. Making mistakes and playing games. Traditionally, in schools, what are the two things that are discouraged? Playing in lessons and failing. And yet these are the two most powerful ways for the mind to learn. Playing games, frequent incremental success if you're successful in little stages, anybody here play Angry Birds? You play Angry Birds? Yeah, okay, you play Angry Birds. If you play Angry Birds, you're getting frequent little rewards every time you're successful. And the brain loves that. Little rewards on a regular basis. Anybody play Grand Theft Auto? Okay, Grand Theft Auto. Games like Grand Theft Auto, they actually give you what is called safe stress. When you're playing the game, you get stressed. But it's actually safe. It's safe stress. And the brain responds to safe stress. That's why these games are, as a learning tool, if we could create games like this but for learning, it would be brilliant. Cooperative learning. Does anybody play EVE online? Okay. Massive multiplayer online role-playing games. Role-playing games which you play on the internet with millions of people all around the world. Encourage collaborative learning. This game, which is called EVE Online, is used at Harvard Business School for modelling business, for modelling social circumstances, social situations. Very powerful learning tool. So games, playing, failing, all of these things have come out of the latest discoveries in neuroscience. So if we can start to develop learning situations based on these, then what we're doing is we are creating learning situations that are ideally matched, ideally suited to the way the human brain learns. There is another important discovery that's come from neuroscience, and this is to do with a small part of the brain at the top of the spine called the amygdala. And the amygdala is one of the most important parts of your brain, and it has one of the biggest influences on the way that you react to situations. And basically the amygdala is designed to cope with stress. The amygdala is designed to cope with this kind of situation. From hundreds of thousands of years ago, early man, walking through the jungle, sees a tiger. Instantly, the amygdala does two things. The amygdala sends a message to the heart and the lungs and the nervous system to send your heart rate up, to make you go into shock and to get yourself ready to run away. But the amygdala does something else, which is much more significant. The amygdala sends a message up to the higher brain to stop thinking. It stops you thinking. The amygdala deliberately stops the conscious mind from thinking. There's a very good reason for this. If this man says, there's a tiger, which is a conscious thought, too late, he's dead. What the amygdala does is it sends you running away very fast, screaming, and you don't think about what you've seen until you're 100 yards down the road. So the amygdala deliberately suppresses the conscious mind. Now the problem is, the amygdala cannot tell the difference between a life-threatening situation like this and situations like this. The amygdala thinks it's all stress. The amygdala makes no distinction, it sees no difference between that and that. That is what the amygdala sees. If a teacher shouts at a student the amygdala goes. If a student opens a book full of difficult mathematics that the child does not understand, the amygdala goes. And what happens is, it reduces the ability of the child to think. It's a physical, actual physical, chemical reaction. When you are stressed, you become stupid. It's a deliberate, evolutionary method. It's this. Stress reduces the child's ability to think. So the emotional well-being of students, if students feel scared, if they feel nervous, if they feel that they are not in control, their ability to learn is significantly reduced. Now what I'll do later is I'll show you how, using interactive technology, we can prevent some of the effects of the amygdala, the negative effects that stress cause in the learning mind. So I've talked a little bit about neuroscience, some of the latest discoveries about the human brain. Now I want to look at the current education model that we have in Europe and the West, well, throughout the world. The current education model that we have was developed in the 19th century during the Industrial Revolution. And in the Industrial Revolution, we wanted lots of people who were skilled enough to go and work in factories making things. So our classrooms were basically mini factories. That's a classroom from 1890. All right? And it's based on the factory model. One size fits all. That's my classroom, 1969, when I went to school. Exactly the same. And this is a classroom in Japan in 2010. Nothing has changed. So we are basically basing our education model on a system that was developed over 100 years ago to create factory workers. This is my daughter, Naomi. She's currently at university, but this was when she was at school. And these are all the things that she's into. She's into smartphones, she uses Wikipedia, Facebook, YouTube. She plays games like Assassin's Creed. This is her classroom. So that's her life outside of school. That's her life inside school. And that's one of the reasons why students nowadays suffer from problems with motivation. Because outside the school, they're surrounded by the most fantastic, exciting, game-based technology. And then they go into a classroom and they sit down in front of a teacher with a blackboard. Pokemon! Anybody remember Pokemon? Yes. Yeah, Pokemon. These are all the Pokemon.
And we know names of it.
Yeah? I mean, do you know the name of every Pokemon?
No, I know the story.
Oh, okay, the story. There are kids in England who know the name of every Pokemon. I think there's 500? 550 Pokemon. Let me show you something interesting. That's the periodic table of elements. 100 and more than 103. No, 118 elements that make up everything in the whole universe. Only 118, okay? That's right. Over 500, 118. Alright? Gallium is a post-transition metal that melts at 30 degrees. That is a statement about the element gallium. Ponyta is a fire Pokemon that evolves into Rapidash. That's a statement about a Pokemon. At one time, every child in England would know that piece of information. Very few children in England would know that. But which is more important? Which is more valuable? And to the human brain, there is no difference. There is no difference between that statement and that statement. The only difference is motivation. Kids are motivated to learn that, and they're not motivated to learn about the elements. So we have a problem with education. This is an interesting little piece of information. That is Socrates. Socrates, who is probably the father of philosophy, the father of learning. If you took Socrates and placed him in a modern classroom, he would be perfectly happy. You bring Socrates into here, there you are, all sitting there, you're my students, I'm Socrates. Perfect. This is familiar. Students, teacher, no problem. This is Hippocrates, who is the father of medicine. If you put Hippocrates into a modern operating theatre in a hospital, he would panic. He would have no idea what to do. He might try, but he would be completely lost. And the point I'm trying to make here is that in education, we haven't changed. Whereas in all the other fields, in medicine, in science, technology and technological advance has completely transformed the way in which we work. You know, and in England we have a massive problem. This is an article from, we have a massive problem because kids are increasingly becoming alienated from learning. This is an article from a newspaper. Children are no longer choosing history. Children are no longer choosing to study history. Children are no longer choosing to learn about the past. But outside school, every weekend in England, you go to towns in England and they have history days. And everybody dresses up, for example, in Elizabethan clothes, and all the kids go and dress up and they love it. Kids love going to these history days. And yet history as a subject in English schools has almost disappeared. It's a fundamental problem of motivation that we need to address. So, what has happened is that because we've got technology now, we've got computers and interactive whiteboards, a lot of people are saying, okay, we've got a problem. We've got a problem with motivation. Let's use technology. Technology will solve all our problems. Right? And people have been thinking about technology and education for a very long time. This is the cover of a magazine from the 1930s, Science Wonder Stories. This is the classroom of the year 2000. This is in the 1930s what the artist thought learning would be like in the year 2000. As you can see, it's not exactly like that, but these are the ideas. Use technology. This is possibly the first interactive whiteboard. This is from a film of 1938, H.G. Wells again, Things to Come. And in this picture you can see a granddad using an interactive whiteboard to teach his daughter about the time when people lived above the surface of the earth. Because now, this is 1996, everybody lives underground, because it's much nicer. Another example, technology. Let's develop technology when we go to sleep, all the information will go into our heads and we can learn that way. There are lots of adverts in magazines of the last century. Learn while you sleep, using technology. The Matrix. It's the Matrix model of education. You just plug a wire in the back of your neck, and you do this, and then suddenly you can speak fluent Italian, and you're an expert in Kung Fu. And this was kind of seen as people used to think this is how technology was going to help us learn. Robots. Isaac Asimov wrote a collection of stories about robots. And the first one, which is called Robbie, is about a little girl who has a robot that teaches her. Robots will have robot teachers. What a fantastic idea. It sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? The idea that a robot can teach. This is a real robot teacher from Japan. In Japan, they have created a robot teacher. And she stands at the front of the class, like that, and she talks to the students. And if you get something wrong, she pulls that expression. That is an angry robot teacher. That is awful. That's absolutely awful. And the problem is, it's the idea that somehow technology has the answer. If we have the technology, if we have a robot teacher, suddenly education will work. And of course it's ridiculous. This is, tell you a little story. This is my brother-in-law. I'm going to take you through my whole family, so you're going to see everybody. This is my brother-in-law, and he worked as a project manager for the British School for the Future project in England. And he was involved in implementing technology in a school district. And there was a meeting where they were going to decide how they were going to use the technology. So my brother-in-law, Paul, went to the meeting, and there was the head of the project managers, and there were guys from Cisco and Microsoft. So it's my brother-in-law thinks, okay, where are the teachers? I said, oh, there's no teachers here. I said, oh, okay. Sat down. And they were talking, getting really excited. Technology in schools. Technology in schools. Education will be fantastic, we'll use technology. Then one of them said this. And the translator, you don't have to translate this, because I don't understand it either. But we'll ensure the exploding use of LAN switching at layer 2, the data link layer, to increase performance and provide more bandwidth to meet new data networking applications deployed in the classrooms. This will let us increase throughput for work groups and local servers. The teachers will be so happy. You know, and basically they were talking about machinery, they're talking about wires and servers. And they thought, and my brother-in-law Paul said, you know, there are no teachers here. And they kind of went, no. I said, okay, have you spoken to any teachers? And they kind of went, no. Okay, so you're talking about this in classrooms for education, but you haven't thought about how it's going to be used, and you haven't thought about the education side of things. Then my brother-in-law Paul, he went to another school, and this was a private school, and the headmaster wanted to use technology in education. And so my brother-in-law Paul went and met the headmaster, and he said, okay, what are you thinking of? You know, what kind of infrastructure, what kind of education using technology are you thinking of? And the headmaster said, I saw these great handheld things at the back of GQ magazine, and I'd like every student in my school to have one. And my brother-in-law Paul said, things. He said, yeah, handheld things, they're really cool. They've got screens and they've got buttons and they're great. And my brother-in-law Paul said, well, what are you going to use them for? And the headmaster went, and he said, have you spoken to the teachers? I was like, no. So again, it's the idea that technology will solve everything. If we only give everybody lots of technology, somehow education will work. And so, on the basis of this, people put machines in schools, but without thinking, what are the educational goals of this technology? And for the teachers, it's a nightmare. The teachers, it's a nightmare. My wife's a teacher. All her friends are teachers. What do they say about technology? No time, too difficult, it always crashes, no resources. This is what happens when technology is implemented into the classroom without thinking about the education. And it's difficult to teach the whole class. Technology is very dangerous. Technology is very sexy, it's very seductive, but it's very dangerous. Does anybody remember Second Life? Second Life? Has anybody else heard of Second Life? Now that is really interesting, because in 2007, Second Life was the future of education. Second Life, it's like an online role-playing game. You create a little cartoon character of yourself, and you can then go around three-dimensional worlds. Lots of universities, especially in Asia, spent millions of dollars creating virtual universities in Second Life. This was the future. Okay? But 2 years later, what happened to Second Life? Everybody stopped using it. Everybody got bored. You know, at the beginning it's interesting, and then it got boring, and people went and did something else. All that money was wasted on Second Life. Perfect example. Bebo. When my kids first started using the internet, they got onto Bebo. Bebo was fantastic. Let's do Bebo. All their friends were on Bebo. And the teachers said, okay, Bebo. Yes, all the children are on Bebo. I'll tell you what, let's all teachers go on Bebo, and we can communicate with the students, and we can help them with their work. So teachers started to join Bebo. And all the kids went, oh my God, the teachers are on Bebo. So all the kids then went to MySpace. So it's like, so they went to MySpace. So all the teachers are in Bebo, kind of going, where are the kids? Where are the kids going? So, and then MySpace. So all the kids started using MySpace. Great, MySpace. And the teachers go, MySpace, okay, we'll set up a MySpace page for the school, and then we can talk to the kids. So they went on MySpace, and all the kids, you can guess what happened? All the kids went, the teachers are on MySpace, let's go to Facebook. So they went to Facebook. So the teachers are chasing the kids through cyberspace. And this is the danger of chasing technology, because technology changes, and the kids move from technology to technology, from MySpace to Facebook to Twitter. And educators can waste time and money trying to keep up with the kids. Perfect example, we don't know what's coming next. We don't know what the next technology is. We have to be careful. We must not be led by technology. We must develop an education methodology that uses technology, but not one that is led by technology. This is my son's friend. It's not my son. Good. Actually, it's pretty cool. The kids have created for themselves what is known as an exo-self. An exoself is a collection of applications and devices that enhances and augments their personality. So these days, a kid is not just what you see, but it's also their Facebook page, their not MySpace, but their Twitter account, their iTunes library, what they have on the cloud. All these personalities are in a cloud around them called the exoself. And I personally think that part of the job of educators is to provide children with a safe place to create an exoself. Oops, that's my son. To create an exoself. Don't worry about the technology, but give children the skills and the knowledge to build this cloud of information around them in a safe environment, in a safe, encouraged environment. There are problems, big problems, when children interact with technology. This is my son. This is my son. Hey, look, as you can see, he doesn't look the same as his friend. That's my son's history teacher. That is the last day of school, ever. That's the last when my son left school. That's the only time I saw his history teacher smiling. But I'm a strict father. I'm quite a strict father. And teachers at my son's school would ask them to use the internet for research. So they'd say, okay, go on the internet, research about something and write a report. Okay, so they said to my son, go on the internet, do some research about the Lake District, which is a part of England, and write a report. Now I'm quite a, as I said, I'm a strict father, and I said, you know, Owen, show me your homework. He's like, no, show me your homework. Right, so I read it, and I thought, oh, this is good. And I read, the Lake District is especially popular with tourists during the busy summer months. And I read that, and I thought, that's really good. That's really good. And then I read the next bit. If you want to book your cottage online, click on the link below. And what he'd done, he just copied and pasted from the internet. And he hadn't even read what he'd copied and pasted. So it's not enough to teach, you know, technology. Kids have to be taught critical thinking skills. And this is so important because the internet is full of rubbish. It's full of nonsense. Carl Sagan, the late Carl Sagan, wrote a book called The Demon-Haunted World. And it was about, his argument was that even though we live in one of the most scientifically advanced periods in history, the amount of strange pseudoscientific beliefs in the world is increasing. I worry that pseudoscience and superstition will seem year by year more tempting. Perfect examples. This is all from the internet. This guy, David Icke, he believes that the world is ruled by 8-foot-tall lizards who disguise themselves as humans. Queen Elizabeth II of England is a 8-foot-tall intelligent lizard. That's what he says. People believe him. And hundreds of thousands of people believe him. He's a millionaire. So we've got to teach children to be able to critically analyse the content that they find on the internet. Communication, creativity, collaboration, critical thinking. Okay, from the teacher's point of view, technology and education. This is my wife, Judith. She's a primary school teacher, and every day she gets up at 6:30, goes to school, prepares, kids come to class at 9, she teaches from 9 till 3, from 3 till 6 she prepares, she comes home, has dinner, And from 7 until 11, she prepares lessons and marks. Okay? She has no time. And what I've done is I've created what I call the Judith test. The Judith test for education technology. And I work at an education technology company, and whenever we make something new, I show it to my wife. And if she goes, I know it's going to work, it'll be a hit, it'll be perfect in the classroom. And if she goes, I know it will never work, because it'll be too complex, too difficult, too tricky to use. So I think that the fundamental goal for education technology is basically it has to be quick to set up, useful resources, and there should be no fuss in using it. And that, combined with an education methodology developed from the latest findings in neuroscience, an understanding of the need to teach 21st century skills to kids, that I think is the key to developing effective education for technology.